a quiet, suburban neighborhood, the kind of place where neighbors wave hello. Lawns are perfectly trimmed and everyone knows each other's business. Or so they think. A man, David, lived in this community. He was a successful businessman. He lived with his younger, beautiful wife, Claire, and his troubled son, Alex. They seemed like the perfect family. But behind the closed doors of their elegant home, a secret so dark and twisted was festering that it would leave the entire neighborhood in shock. What could possibly lead a wife to betray her husband, not just with another man, but with his own son? And how could love turn so toxic that it would end in murder? David had worked hard to build his life. A self-made man, he had wealth, status, and respect. On the outside, he seemed to have everything: a loving wife, a stable home, and a second chance at happiness after the loss of his first wife. Yet, beneath this polished exterior, cracks in his world were beginning to show. His relationship with Alex, his 22-year-old son from his first marriage, was strained at best. Alex was a troubled young man, battling resentment and feeling like he never measured up to his father's high expectations. Their interactions often ended in heated arguments, leaving an air of tension that hung over the household. Claire, David's wife, was the kind of woman who could light up a room with her charm. She was stunning, magnetic, and always the center of attention. To the outside world, she appeared devoted to her husband, the quintessential trophy wife in their perfect suburban castle. But Claire was restless. Behind her warm smiles and doting facade, she felt trapped in a marriage that had grown stale. She craved passion, excitement, and the thrill of being desired. And she found it where no one could have imagined. Alex, feeling lost and unloved, became an easy target for Claire's manipulations. At first, it was subtle. A kind word here, a lingering touch there. Claire seemed to understand Alex in a way no one else did. She listened to him, made him feel seen, and for the first time in years, Alex felt valued. But what started as small acts of kindness quickly spiraled into something far darker. The line between familial affection and something far more sinister blurred until it was completely erased. Late at night, while David worked long hours, Claire and Alex's secret rendezvous became a regular occurrence. They met in shadowy corners of the house, their whispers and laughter carrying an electric charge of forbidden desire. The risk only seemed to fuel their passion, binding them together in a way that was both intoxicating and dangerous. But secrets like this can't stay hidden forever. And in a house as tightly wound as theirs, it was only a matter of time before something snapped. What could have driven Claire to risk everything for this illicit relationship? Was it truly love? Or was Alex merely a pawn in a larger game? As their connection deepened, so did their contempt for David. Claire began planting seeds in Alex's mind, painting David as the villain standing in the way of their happiness. Slowly but surely, she twisted Alex's vulnerable emotions, convincing him that there was only one way for them to be together. David had to go. And so, the plot was born. It was dangerous, desperate, and reckless, but Claire and Alex convinced themselves it was their only option. They whispered their plans late into the night, imagining a life free from David. But as the fateful day approached, a question lingered in the air. Could they really go through with it? Or would their plan unravel, exposing the horrifying truth to the world? What happened next would send shockwaves through the community, unraveling this seemingly perfect family in the most unimaginable way. The murder was supposed to look like a tragic home invasion, a random act of violence. But in their desperation, Claire and Alex made mistakes. mistakes that would cost them everything. Stay with us as we uncover the chilling twists, the investigation that tore their lives apart, and the trial that exposed the horrifying depths of betrayal. What drives someone to commit such unthinkable acts? And could anything have stopped this tragedy before it spiraled out of control? The answers may surprise you. Claire wasn't always the woman who ended up at the center of a scandalous and tragic affair. She came from modest beginnings, growing up in a small town where ambition was her greatest asset and her heaviest burden. Claire had always known how to use her charm to get what she wanted. When she met David, a wealthy businessman who offered her a life of luxury, she believed she had finally escaped her small-town struggles. David was older, stable, and financially secure, everything Claire thought she needed. In the beginning, their relationship was thrilling. David lavished her with gifts and promises of a glamorous future. But over time, the spark faded. David's long hours at work left Claire feeling neglected and unfulfilled. Despite her beautiful home and privileged life, Claire was lonely and restless, yearning for the excitement she felt she had lost. Alex, David's 22-year-old son, was the complete opposite of his father. Troubled and rebellious, Alex struggled to cope with the loss of his mother and lived in constant conflict with David. David, strict and demanding, saw Alex as a disappointment, while Alex resented his father's controlling nature. Their strained relationship left Alex feeling alienated, angry, and desperate for someone to understand him. Claire noticed this tension and used it to her advantage. At first, her gestures toward Alex were small, encouraging words, a sympathetic ear, but they soon escalated. She became his confidant, someone who made him feel valued and understood. For Alex, who had long felt overlooked, Claire's attention was intoxicating. For Claire, Alex was a chance to escape her dissatisfaction, a thrill she couldn't resist. Their connection deepened quickly, crossing boundaries that should have never been crossed. Late-night conversations turned into stolen moments, and their secret grew darker with each passing day. Alex, starved for validation, clung to Claire while she reveled in the power she held over him. They fed off each other's emotions, creating a bond that was as toxic as it was passionate. As their relationship intensified, Claire began planting seeds of doubt in Alex's mind about David. She painted him as the obstacle standing in the way of their happiness. Slowly but surely, Claire manipulated Alex into believing there was only one way for them to truly be together. David had to go. Claire painted a vivid picture of a life free from restrictions, one where they could be together without fear or judgment. The only obstacle, she insisted, was David. Her words were deliberate, carefully chosen to make Alex believe that he was not just a participant, but the only one capable of taking control. She framed the idea as both a necessity and an opportunity. Without David, their lives would transform. There would be no more arguments, no more tension, and no more feeling like second-class citizens in their own home. She spoke of the financial security they would gain from David's life insurance, a payout large enough to start over somewhere far away. Alex was told he would finally prove his strength and independence. This wasn't just about love. It was a chance for him to redefine himself. The plan was crafted with precision. The murder would appear as a random home invasion gone wrong. Alex would carry out the act late at night when David was alone in the house. Claire would establish a solid alibi, making it seem impossible for her to be involved. Every detail was considered, every step rehearsed. Claire's unwavering confidence fueled Alex's resolve, pushing aside any doubts he might have had. On the chosen night, Alex waited outside the home, the weight of the task pressing down on him. The house was dark, quiet, the kind of silence that seemed to stretch endlessly. Inside, David was relaxing in the living room, unaware of the danger creeping toward him. Alex entered cautiously, each movement slow and deliberate. His hands trembled as he approached his father, the plan repeating in his mind like a mantra. The act was quick, leaving David lifeless in his own home. Alex worked to stage the scene, scattering items, overturning furniture, and emptying drawers to simulate a robbery. But his nerves betrayed him. In his rush to complete the scene, small but critical mistakes were made. A shoe print was left near the back door. An overturned lamp rested at an unnatural angle. Details that, upon closer inspection, wouldn't align with the story they planned to tell. Claire, meanwhile, had ensured she was far from the house, providing herself with an airtight alibi. Her confidence in their plan gave her an air of calm, even as she waited for news. But the moment police arrived at the scene, the illusion began to crack. Officers immediately noticed inconsistencies. The supposed break-in looked staged, the items scattered too precisely. David's injuries didn't align with the story of a random attack. The evidence pointed to something far more personal. Alex, unable to control his emotions, began to falter under questioning. Detectives noticed his nervous demeanor, the way his hands shook as he answered their inquiries. His responses lacked the clarity they expected from someone truly shocked by a tragedy. Their suspicion grew as they pieced together the clues he had unknowingly left behind. As the investigation progressed, more details came to light. Security cameras from nearby houses captured unusual movements around the property. Neighbors recalled hearing nothing that night, no signs of a struggle or forced entry. Every new piece of evidence chipped away at the story Alex and Claire had tried to construct. It wasn't long before law enforcement turned their focus to Claire. Her calmness, once her strength, now seemed calculated. Investigators began to probe her relationship with Alex, uncovering patterns and behaviors that raised even more questions. The alibi that seemed so secure now had holes, and the bond between Claire and Alex became impossible to ignore. What they thought was a foolproof plan unraveled under the weight of their mistakes and the relentless pursuit of the truth. The walls were closing in, and their secrets were on the verge of exposure. Each passing hour brought them closer to the reckoning they had so desperately tried to avoid. How long could they maintain the facade? What would Alex do as the pressure mounted? And would Claire's calculated moves be enough to save her from the inevitable consequences? The investigation began in earnest as detectives combed through the scene with meticulous attention to detail. They had seen their share of home invasions, but something about this one immediately felt off. The crime scene lacked the hallmarks of a genuine robbery gone wrong. Valuables, including expensive electronics and jewelry, were untouched. Drawers were pulled open, but their contents remained neatly arranged, as if someone had staged the appearance of a burglary without understanding the chaos such crimes usually involve. The back door, supposedly the point of entry, showed no signs of forced entry, which made the investigators pause. How had an intruder entered without breaking in? From the outset, David's death appeared too deliberate, too calculated. The injuries he sustained didn't align with a scenario where a burglar was caught off guard. Instead, they suggested an intent far more personal. Detectives began piecing together the evidence, each inconsistency tightening their focus on the household itself. They questioned Claire and Alex separately, noting their responses and body language. Claire was calm, almost unnervingly so, sticking to her story with precision. Alex, however, was visibly shaken, his answers stilted and contradictory. Surveillance footage from a neighbor's security camera provided the first major breakthrough. While the camera didn't capture the crime itself, it did record Alex walking near the property during the hours leading up to the murder. This discovery contradicted Alex's initial claim that he had been elsewhere. Investigators pressed him on this point, but his explanations only grew more muddled. The next damning piece of evidence came from Alex's phone. Forensic analysis revealed a series of text messages between him and Claire. The messages, though often cryptic, hinted at a relationship far beyond that of a stepson and stepmother. Some texts referenced their plans to be together and hinted at obstacles standing in their way. Obstacles detectives now believed referred to David. Other messages referenced money and the future, tying their motivations to the substantial life insurance policy in David's name, with Claire listed as the sole beneficiary. Financial records further reinforced the detective's theory. The life insurance payout, combined with Claire's dissatisfaction in her marriage, painted a clear picture of motive. Investigators started to piece together how Claire's charm and influence over Alex had likely pushed him into committing an act he would never have considered on his own. The mounting evidence began to form a web that trapped Alex in its center. Detectives called him in for further questioning, and it was clear from the outset that he was struggling under the weight of his lies. His body language was tense, his hands fidgeting as he tried to stick to the story he and Claire had concocted. But the detectives knew how to exploit cracks in a suspect's armor. They presented him with the surveillance footage and the text messages, each piece of evidence chipping away at his defenses. At first, Alex tried to hold firm, denying everything. But as the questions grew more pointed, he began to falter. The detectives pressed harder, pointing out the inconsistencies in his story and the overwhelming evidence against him. They described the consequences of remaining silent versus the potential leniency he might receive if he came clean. It wasn't long before the pressure became too much to bear. In a tearful breakdown, Alex confessed. He revealed the entire twisted truth. How Claire had manipulated him, convinced him that David was the source of all their problems, and pushed him into carrying out the murder. He described how she had orchestrated the plan, from the timing of the act to the staged break-in, ensuring she would have an alibi. His words poured out in a mixture of guilt and relief, as if unburdening himself from a weight he had carried for far too long. With Alex's confession in hand, detectives turned their full attention to Claire. They confronted her with the evidence, including Alex's detailed account of her role as the mastermind. Claire, who had remained calm and composed throughout the investigation, now found herself backed into a corner. She denied everything, accusing Alex of lying to protect himself, but the text messages and financial motives were impossible to explain away. The investigators could see her confidence wavering as the walls closed in around her. The shocking revelations of their relationship and the calculated murder plot rocked the community. Neighbors who had once admired the family were now horrified by the betrayal and deceit that had unfolded so close to home. The story dominated headlines, with every new detail feeding the public's fascination and outrage. Alex's confession not only revealed the depths of their deception, but also raised difficult questions about guilt and responsibility. Was Alex a victim of manipulation, coerced by someone he trusted, or was he equally culpable in the crime? Claire's influence over him was undeniable, but at what point did his actions become his own? What do you think? Should Alex be seen as a victim, or does his willingness to carry out the murder make him equally responsible? Share your thoughts below as we unravel the courtroom drama and the consequences of their deadly choices. The trial of Claire and Alex captivated not just their local community, but the entire nation. From the moment the case became public, it was a media sensation. Every major news outlet reported on the salacious details of the affair, the betrayal, and the brutal murder. Headlines were splashed across newspapers with phrases like "Stepmother's deadly seduction" and "Family torn apart by murder and forbidden love." Morning shows debated the psychological implications of Claire and Alex's relationship, while legal experts speculated on their fates. Social media buzzed with theories, outrage, and endless discussions, turning the courtroom into a stage for one of the most gripping dramas in recent memory. Outside the courthouse, crowds gathered daily, some holding signs demanding justice for David, others simply curious to witness the fall of a family that had once seemed so ordinary. Paparazzi swarmed every entrance, capturing photos of Claire and Alex as they were escorted into the building. Claire, dressed in conservative outfits, appeared calm and composed, while Alex's haggard, guilt-stricken expression told a different story. The stark contrast between the two became a point of fascination, with commentators analyzing their every move and expression. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was electric. Seats were packed with journalists, family members, and members of the public who had managed to secure a spot. The prosecution wasted no time painting a damning portrait of Claire. They described her as a manipulative and self-serving woman who had preyed on Alex's vulnerabilities to achieve her goal of eliminating David. They presented the evidence with methodical precision. The surveillance footage showing Alex near the home, the text messages between him and Claire that hinted at their forbidden relationship, and the financial records that pointed to Claire's motive. The affair became the centerpiece of the prosecution's case. As they laid out the details, the courtroom gasped at the sheer audacity of Claire's actions. Witnesses testified about moments that now seemed glaring in hindsight. How Claire's affection for Alex often crossed boundaries. How she seemed more invested in Alex's well-being than her husband's. The prosecution argued that Claire had carefully groomed Alex, isolating him from his father and gaining his trust to the point where he would do anything for her. Alex's confession left the courtroom in stunned silence. He detailed how Claire planted the idea that David was the cause of their unhappiness and described the panic he felt the night of the murder as he followed her instructions to stage the scene. His emotional account painted Claire as the mastermind, a chilling portrayal of manipulation that shocked even seasoned observers. Claire's defense argued she was a scapegoat, claiming Alex acted out of jealousy and frustration. They pointed to inconsistencies in his confession and suggested he used Claire to deflect blame. However, overwhelming evidence, text messages, financial records, and Alex's testimony portrayed her as cold and calculating. On the stand, Claire denied involvement, claiming Alex had misinterpreted her actions, but her calm facade crumbled under cross-examination. Alex's defense focused on his troubled past. Alex, on the other hand, was consumed by guilt. The weight of his actions and the life he had taken bore down on him every day. His once fiery rebellion was replaced by a quiet, somber demeanor. He participated in therapy programs offered by the prison, trying to make sense of the choices he had made and the person he had become. Alex wrote letters to David's family, though they remained unanswered, as he sought some form of redemption. He spent his days reflecting on his actions, hoping that one day he might find a way to atone for what he had done. The question of redemption loomed large for both Claire and Alex. Could either of them truly find a way to make amends for the devastation they had caused? For Claire, her lack of remorse and refusal to acknowledge her role in the crime seemed to leave little room for redemption. For Alex, the possibility remained, though it was fraught with challenges. Could his remorse and willingness to change ever outweigh the harm he had done? What began as a forbidden relationship spiraled into a deadly plot, leaving a man murdered, a family destroyed, and 2 lives forever lost to the consequences of their actions. The tragedy serves as a haunting example of how unchecked emotions and selfish desires can unravel even the strongest bonds, turning love and trust into tools of destruction. As we close this chapter, we want to hear from you. What would you do if you discovered a dark secret like this within your own family? How would you handle the betrayal? And could you ever find a way to forgive? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective might just spark a conversation worth having. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated on our upcoming stories. We'll dive into another shocking true crime case that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about human nature. Stay tuned, and thank you for watching. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.